Hi and welcome to this video tutorial. Today I've brought you 5 techniques that will make your tapping figures sound a little more interesting and less cliched. The two-handed tapping technique, made very popular by Eddie Van Halen, is somewhat less popular today than it was in the 80s. Of course, there's still a lot of guitarists who use this technique, but in most cases they have modified their playing style significantly to avoid direct comparison with Van Halen. So when it comes to the two-handed tapping technique, there are now a number of cliches that you should avoid if you want to sound fresh, interesting and unique. There are always ways to make a technique your own, and if you are creative and play a technique for a while and experiment with it, your own ideas will eventually come to light. I'm gonna show you 5 two-hand tapping variations that I've come up with or encountered over time, or that I've seen other guitarists use. Let's move closer to the fretboard and get started. Variation number 1 is what I like to call the tapping trill. You're all familiar with the very simple trills that Hendrix liked to use, where you simply play a note repeatedly with hammer-ons and pull-offs in quick succession. Here's how it would work in A minor. If you add a tap with your ring finger between the hammer-ons and pull-offs, it sounds super fast and isn't that difficult to master. You simply alternate between the respective finger of the fretting and the picking hand. This can be done at any point with any finger. And also with whole and half steps, it doesn't really matter. This would be one way to finish solos or start a cool run, for example, and it's something that not many guitarists do. With a little time and practice, you can use this to create your own runs and licks. I like to call variation number 2 extended fingerings. You can play this either pentatonically or even with the complete minor and major scales. Just take any fingering, such as the first one in A minor pentatonic as shown here. Of course, you should know all your fingerings very well so that you know which notes follow from the next fingering. Here we have these 6 notes. That's a D, a G, a C, an E, an A, and another D. And I can now combine these with the pentatonic scale. Or with the complete minor scale. That's already pretty cool, and you can even do this in the octave. That means I take the first note of the same fingering on each string, this time in the 17th fret. And then I can tap everything up here. The complete fingering of the octave can also be used. Nuno Bettencourt really likes to do this. Depending on how you do it afterwards, especially if you use fingerings other than just the first one, you can also create something new with it. In any case, it's a very cool variation of this technique. Variation number 3 is called tap slides. With your right hand and your tapping finger, you can do exactly what you would do here with your left hand. You simply play a figure somewhere with your left hand, such as G and A here. Then you tap the notes that follow. Here we have B, C, D, and E. And then you simply play a few slides with the finger of your picking hand. These sound especially cool when you're sliding them backwards. Of course, you can also go higher up the fretboard depending on what comes to mind. This also sounds very cool across all 6 strings. Variation number 4 is called Arpeggio Tapping. Of course, this has been around in a certain form since Eruption. However, Nuno Bettencourt did it in a very special way in Get the Funk Out, which I modified a little for my purposes. You can also play this technique across all 6 strings and keep finding new arpeggios. This is also a very good exercise for really learning all the notes on the fretboard by heart and thus visualizing your arpeggios everywhere. I'll show you how to do it very slowly. If we do this in A minor, we simply need the A-C-E triad and then the inversion C, E, and A. And we just tap that here from the low to the high E string. A, C, and E. And then just repeat that. Most people start with simple figures like these when learning two-hand tapping. This is the typical Eruption thing, but on the low E string. So here we have the first triad. Next we have our C, the third, our fifth E, and here our next root note. It's best to familiarize yourself with both of these first and alternate between them before moving on to the D string. On the D string, we now play the same notes as before, simply in the octave. Here we have our A on the D string on the 7th fret, our minor third, the C on the 10th fret, and here on the 14th fret, our note E. Above, on the G string, we have C on the 5th fret, E on the 9th fret, and A on the 14th fret. You can now connect these two strings together. Then combine them with the first two strings, but very slowly at first. The next octave jump is a little more difficult. Here we are on the 10th fret on the B string with the root note A, then on the 13th fret with the 3rd C, and then we have the 5th E on the 17th fret. If we go up one more string, we have our C on the 8th fret, our E on the 12th fret, and our A on the 17th fret. It is important to practice the transition from the G to the B string very carefully and slowly. Take your time with this variation. Start with A minor, then move on to C major, and so on, so that you first learn the entire A minor scale in arpeggios and then eventually try to play all possible scales as arpeggios using this technique. I think that after a while you'll come up with a lot of cool ways to incorporate this into your solos. Finally, as variation number 5, here's something that sounds pretty cool if you want to incorporate some whammy bar sounding notes into your solos, but like me as a Les Paul player, don't have a guitar with a vibrato system. I noticed at some point that if I take any note, such as C here, and then tap the following note several times in a row and play a fast vibrato, it sounds something like playing with a whammy bar. That means I take a C and a D here and tap them quickly over and over again, doing fast hammer-ons and pull-offs while performing a very fast vibrato at the same time. Taken together, it sounds a bit like a whammy bar. It's difficult to avoid creating noise when playing fast vibrato and taps, so you should practice this in one spot for a while first. Many guitarists who tap a lot or play complex legato runs attach either a hairband to the top of the neck or specially designed dampers to the headstock to prevent noise. This makes things a little easier. Here's the technique again. Maybe it's something for you too. I haven't seen any other guitarists who do it exactly the same way I do, but maybe I'm just not informed enough. I don't know. I'm happy to show you this trick. It's something I've used quite often in my own solos, and I hope you find a use for it too. And that's it for today's lesson. I hope I was able to give you some food for thought and that you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos from me and click the little bell icon so you don't miss new videos. See you again in the next video. Until then, bye.